Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We are having a special edition of Daily Palantir today. And this special edition is called The Roast of Ross Gerber. Now, I'm not actually going to be roasting the guy. I don't really, not taking personal shots or anything like that. But Ross Gerber decided that he wanted to give his thoughts and opinions on Palantir yesterday in a live stream. We're going to be reacting to what he had to say. Now, why am I doing an entire Daily Palantir episode on this? There is a lot of news that I have to cover. I'm going to leave it for tomorrow because I think this episode is important. I said I was going to do this episode on the morning live stream. And look, we got to do this episode. Why do we have to do this episode? Because Ross Gerber, on December 31st, 2021, 1 month after I started posting on YouTube, which was November 2021, he goes on Dave Lee's podcast. For those that don't know Dave Lee, he is a YouTuber who is in the Tesla space. And, Dave is a very successful channel. Ross is a fund manager, manages $2 billion. Ross goes on the channel. And Dave Lee asks him a question. He says, hey, what do you think about Palantir? Palantir had just been public for about a year now. And at the time, Ross Gerber had some very interesting things to say. We're going to watch what he had to say. In fact, what he said was so bad that Dave Lee had to delete the part of what he was saying out of the video. Thankfully, because I reacted to it the day after it came out, I got to keep that part of the video, and so it's still on YouTube. So if you're watching this, don't tell Dave Lee because he might tell me to take it down, but it's still on YouTube for now, and so we're good to go. And we're going to take a look at what Mr. Ross Gerber had to say. When he said this, it was the first introduction to me about how many people in the investing community feel that there is a certain stigma with Palantir that I think has fundamentally changed over the past 2 years, but that does exist, and it makes people hesitant to allocate capital to the company. And so we're going to listen to what he had to say, and then we're going to listen to his updated thoughts. If anyone wants to watch the 30-minute breakdown I did of Ross Gerber back in December of 2021, I will link it in the description. That was my first month on YouTube. I am an international competitive debate champion. I did debate in high school, and so a lot of people didn't know that I have a background in analyzing and constructing and deconstructing arguments and trying to bring different perspectives. And this was the first video, I think, that showed people, oh, like, maybe Amit can actually break down some of these arguments. And at the end of the day, Ross Gerber just had very bad arguments. So it was very easy for me to break them down because they were really bad. So let's take a look at what he had to say back then. And then we're going to take a look at what he had to say about 2 years later and some not nice things that he had to say about Palantir. The reason I'm doing this episode is because it's not that he's bearish. It's that the way he's talking about Palantir to me is quite frankly just... it's not something I think someone managing $2 billion should be doing. So let's hear what he had to say.
Before that, so on Palantir, so Palantir might say that, hey, they don't really, hold the data or sell the data. They're just servicing their clients, the government's own and collect the data, hypothetically.
Isn't that what the German soldiers said when they were burning people? that Hitler, they were just doing a job. They had no idea that they were burning humans.
He then goes on to talk about how Palantir is equivalent to Nazi Germany. What they're doing is stealing your data. They're exporting it. And I mean, that little segment where he said, isn't that what the Germans said back during the times of Hitler? It's like, wait a second. Did you just compare what Palantir is doing, which is data integration and B2B analytics? Yes, they do work in the government space as well. A lot of that is what they're doing is helping Ukraine. I mean, like, they're doing a lot of important special things. By the way, they just got a $116 million extension on their Army Vantage contract. We'll talk about that tomorrow. And you compare that to fascist Germany. It's just like, what? What? Is that what you're saying Palantir is doing? You're saying Palantir is helping the United States become a fascist state? And so, you really start to put it together and you're like, wait a second. There's no way that this guy is actually believing what he's saying right now. But then you realize, wait a second, no, Ross actually believes this. He legitimately believes that this is what Palantir is. So this is what he said yesterday on his live stream. He hasn't talked about Palantir in a while, and I wanted to bring it up because I want to break down some of his arguments because I simply felt that if someone's going to break them down, it might as well be me because I don't think he necessarily understands Palantir.
Okay, Ross, we need an update on Palantir.
Oh, people just love getting me to talk about stuff.
They love it. I can't even tell you how many things.
So I watched this interview with Alex Karp the other day, and if anybody can watch an interview with this guy and not be freaked out, he's literally like scary,
I want to see it.
Dude, you should see this guy. Well, he's like one of these, like, I'm fiercely American,
right?
Like, we fight terrorists, and basically he was like, these kids on the campuses are terrorists and will never get a job. And basically my company tracks all the data. I know who all these kids are and they'll never work again, kind of thing. And I was like, geez, this guy, scary. So Palantir, why would I want to invest in that again? I don't know. I mean, they make softwares for companies.
Let me see if someone listed.
I think they make software for companies and people to be trapped.
Are you ready to buy Palantir? They've become an AI leader.
Well, they like to say that. But their application is a government application.
I know there's got to be more comments on Palantir. I'm trying to scroll.
No, it's definitely an AI play, but it trades at a very high multiple. They don't make money, and the insiders are constantly selling stock. I mean, if you want to see insiders making money, look at insider sales at Palantir. So whenever I see that, it's always a warning sign.
Right.
So Palantir guys are just cashing out left and right. I don't know if you noticed that.
So Meet Kevin added Palantir to his ETF.
Oh, did he? For pricing power? They have pricing power. It's like, do you even know how much it costs to use Palantir? I think he has Tesla still as his top holding, and they have no pricing power at all. In fact, they have negative pricing power, right? So it's like, who has pricing power? It's NVIDIA. NVIDIA's got pricing power. Jeez, they can charge anything for a chip, right? I don't know. Tesla certainly doesn't have pricing power. Palantir doesn't have pricing power. But when you add those stocks, you get all these people who talk about your fund and all this kind of stuff. But my fundamental thing with Palantir is a black box company. You can't figure out what it's worth, who it is. I don't know if I trust anything they do. I don't like outsourcing government activities to private enterprises who track us. So there's a lot of things about Palantir. I get why people like it, but it's not for me. But just watch some Alex Karp interviews and be like, this is the guy. I don't know. I think he's cashing out. I think he's cashing out big.
Okay, so let's discuss everything Mr. Gerber says here. And let's have a little discussion here. And let me know what you guys think in the comments as well on Ross Gerber's updated thoughts on Palantir. So a couple things that I think he says. Number one, Ross Gerber obviously has a ad hominem attack against Alex Karp. He is someone who has been quoted on, I think it was a conference, or not a conference, but like a little webinar thing he was on back in like January of 2022, where he called Alex Karp the devil. This happened. This was a couple months after the Dave Lee interview where he called Palantir Nazi Germany. So he does not have a favorable opinion of Alex Karp. Now, you try to dig deeper into understanding why does someone not like the CEO of a company? Because whenever I understand or I try to analyze the bear case of a company, it never really starts with like the CEO sucks. It's more so a question of like, maybe I don't like the CEO, but like I try to go deeper into why I don't like the CEO. So for example, for Facebook, a lot of people don't like Zuckerberg, which forms their investment thesis because of, their own ideological dogmatic opinion of who they think he is. And there's enough stuff out there in the world for you to at least understand people's perspectives on not liking Zuckerberg. So I'm like, okay, if you don't like Facebook because of Zucks, I can at least understand that. I don't agree with that being the reason you don't want to invest in Facebook, but I can understand why you're not a fan of it. When it comes to Alex Karp, there's not that much out there about him in terms of the broad mainstream media. He's not a Zuckerberg. He's not an Elon Musk. He is, famous to us in the community and in the defense sector, but he's not really like one of those major CEOs that's out there into the world, right? So you kind of think about going deeper and like, why does Ross Gerber not like Alex Karp? What has Alex Karp said or done that is so bad to the point where he called him the devil, says, Karp is scary in his interviews? And I think, quite frankly, it's based on his physical looks because Gerber said this back in 2022 that Karp looks like the devil if you look at his hair, right? That was the quote. And it's just like, okay, so you're going to call a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company the devil because of what his hair looks like. It's like, that's just already just off, like the way you're starting your analysis. And you manage $2 billion of capital for clients. And it's very weird that you're managing that much money and that's your investment due diligence on a company like Palantir. Number two, he's saying Karp is scary. I think this to me means you're just quite frankly, you're ignorant in terms of trying to understand what Karp says. I think most people that don't understand Alex Karp's message have likely either not made a lot of money in Palantir, right? They did it because if you did understand it at $6-7, it was screaming a buy that you should have been buying it and you saw where the world was going, or you think he's full of shit. And so it begs the question, taking the bear case, is Alex Karp full of shit? Well, what is Alex Karp's message? His message in a nutshell, right? There's a lot of components to his message, his overall brand, but in a nutshell, the argument is Western values are under attack. There is geopolitical uncertainty at the levels that we haven't seen, quite frankly, in the past decade. And as a result of that, there is going to be a necessity for governments, especially governments that are part of NATO and Western allies, to reaffirm their Western values by making sure they have software that is used at the highest levels in the commercial sector, also integrated into the government and the military so that they can be ready in case something were to happen, like a China, like a Taiwan, like a Israel-Hamas that has happened, like a Russia-Ukraine that has happened. And so Karp's core fundamental argument, the way I understand it, is that we should protect Western values. And so if Karp's argument is basically that we should protect Western values, my question to Ross is like, why is that scary? Do you not understand that? Is that too intellectual, which shouldn't be too intellectual? Does him speaking about German philosophy make you feel weird? Like, I think if you honestly feel Karp's message is scary or weird or like, you know, something where you don't want to be involved in it, it's because you haven't done enough research on his message. You haven't actually listened to him. I've listened to Karp a lot, so I'm obviously biased here, but I come from a philosophical background. I studied philosophy in high school. I did internationally competitive debate, which means you have to have a lot of philosophical arguments. And so when Karp makes a business argument for technology, software, and combines it with philosophy, it speaks to me. And it speaks to me because I like business. I have a finance channel. I really enjoy the process of investing and figuring out the due diligence around a company. That stuff is very exciting to me. I have my own startup. I'm trying to build my own business. That stuff is really cool. And then when you bring up a philosophical element towards it, and you really create intersections between how that philosophy makes the business meaningful, have a mission, have a purpose, actually matter to society, well, that's something that's not that scary to me. And so the argument that Karp is scary and weird, I mean, I think that Ross honestly just hasn't done due diligence. And you know what's really sad about this is that the guy manages a lot of money. And if you manage that much money, it's not that you can't be bearish on a stock or not like an industry or whatever. Like, you can have your own perspective. It's how you choose to have a perspective. When you're that big of a name, you can't just say, oh, you know, XYZ is not important, or XYZ is bad, or XYZ is the devil. Like, you've got to have some level of logical rationale, you would hope, if you're managing that much money, for your public opinion on certain topics, especially if those certain topics are public companies that actually matter in the world. Either you haven't done the research, you don't care, you've not done the due diligence, or you genuinely are so ideologically and dogmatic around your own belief system, which is just not a good quality to have in general, that you can't see beyond the horizon, that you might actually be a bit ignorant when it comes to things. And I think Ross has, unfortunately, that case when it comes to Palantir. He then says they're not an AI leader because their only application is the government. This is just, I mean, there's multiple surveys that have come out that saying outside of OpenAI, Palantir is second when it comes to AI, not only software procurement, but AI innovation. So it's like, I mean, the guy just hasn't seen the studies. He hasn't actually looked at the software, doesn't know what AIP is. So, I mean, there was no argument around AIP or founder or ontology. I doubt he even knows what that is. He's just like, well, they say they're an AI leader, but they sell it to the government. It's like, yeah, they sell AI software to the government, and they also sell it to the commercial sector. It's not that complicated to understand. Okay, next thing he says is that the software is for tracking. Yes, there are tracking and targeting components to their software. A lot of that is on the mission-critical battlefield situations. If he's talking about Palantir spying on us and spying on your data, I think this argument is just so sad. It's so silly. It's such a bad misconception. This is the entire reason we almost lost the NHS contract, because a lot of people in the British media thought that Palantir was spying on you, taking your data. Two quick arguments. One, Palantir doesn't monetize data. They can't monetize data. There's nothing they can do with the data. They're not selling it for advertising. They're not selling it to third parties. Facebook, Amazon, Google. Those are the companies that are doing that with data. Palantir is not doing that with data. Palantir is a piece of software that helps you integrate, manage, and understand your data at scale. So this idea of software for tracking is just ridiculous. And second of all, one of the reasons why Palantir is actually building software for governments, which is why he keeps saying, yeah, they're a government contractor, is because a lot of those governments need their software to be productive. The reason Palantir just got a $115 million extension on their Army Vantage contract today, the reason they got $250 million back in September, the reason they got $480 million from the NHS, the reason they are getting these big government contracts is because they're helping the government operationalize AI and machine learning. They're helping the government become more efficient and more effective. And if you listen to Shyam Sankar on the recent podcast, he's against the military-industrial complex. He does not want to fight wars for the sake of fueling defense contractors. That is what has been happening for 40 years with the Lockheed Martins of the world, and he has great respect for them. But his argument is that software is the differentiator when it comes to the military-industrial complex, because software prevents bad things from happening. Software prevents you to have to, spend $50 billion on a bunch of new guns and helicopters and bombs. Software is the tactical nuclear weapon that can actually be deployed to protect your sovereignty in a geopolitical world in which sovereignty is under threat, Western values are under threat, which has been Karp's message for a very long time. That's where software can become important. It can become the great equalizer. And so this entire argument that the software is tracking you and it's trying to hurt you. It's like, it's just a ridiculous argument in and of itself, given that Palantir doesn't think of themselves as like trying to make a war happen in order to make money. Their argument is, if things are going to happen that are bad, we should have things to protect us, and we should definitely have things to mitigate those things when they happen. Final thing I'll say right here is civil liberties. Peter Thiel created Palantir after 9/11 in hopes of, if the government retains that much power over individuals, then when something bad happens, the government can then use that as an excuse to invade your privacy. So for example, after 9/11, we got the Patriot Act. Why? Because the government thought it was necessary to protect the safety of the public by intruding on the civil liberties of the individual, in case one of those individuals tried to do something like blow up an airplane, and that would hurt the public. When you have software like Palantir's that is from a third party that is not the government, aka it is battle tested and built from the ground up with civil liberties technology in place, there's something called cross collaborative filtering, which means that the FBI can't see certain data that the CIA can see, and that's built into the very fabric of the technology that Palantir has created. That is way better than the government having control. And what that does is that mitigates the necessity from a philosophical perspective for the government to have another Patriot Act. This is what happened in Europe. Peter Thiel and Alex Karp have talked many times that in 2014 to 2019, Palantir software has been used to thwart a lot of different terrorist attacks. If those terrorist attacks happened, those governments all across the EU would have become more authoritarian, more to the extreme, and they would have become more serious about invading people's civil liberties in order to protect the general public. When you were able to use technology and software to not have terrorist attacks, then you basically don't have an excuse to be able to invade people's civil liberties, because at that point, well, the software did the thing that you thought you needed to do by invading their liberties, which is use technology and tracking and all this type of stuff to stop bad people from doing bad things. So, I mean, at the end of the day, the entire argument that the software is for tracking, it lacks such philosophical nuance in understanding the origins of Palantir, which also, if you understand this stuff, you understand the investment thesis. But it doesn't seem like Ross Gerber wanted to do that due diligence. It doesn't seem like he cared about this stuff. It doesn't seem like he knows about the origins of the company. He thinks of them as big brother. They're spying on everybody, and that's bad. You know why the NHS paid Palantir all this money? Is because they have a socialist healthcare system. The reason they have a socialist healthcare system is because they have particular values about everyone having access to healthcare as a human right. Well, the free market is what makes healthcare and a lot of things in capitalism effective. If you get rid of the free market, the only way you can still make that system somewhat effective is via technology. This is why the NHS did an entire overhaul, because after spending $30 billion on legacy IT infrastructure over the past decade, and they couldn't get the job done, and they couldn't really solve their bureaucratic problems, Palantir is maybe the thing that solves it, because instead of sacrificing your socialist values, you actually have a piece of software that can help protect those values and enable new types of technology. Just like instead of invading on people's civil liberties, you have a piece of software that can stop that from happening, because it can actually get the job done. It can stop the terrorists, just like it can reduce wait times and backlogs in the NHS. That's what Ross Gerber doesn't understand, and it's because he hasn't tried to understand Palantir. Okay, final couple things he says. He says it trades at a high multiple. Insiders sell stock. Yeah, it trades at a high multiple because software. I mean, look at Snowflake. Snowflake hit $200 today. Snowflake works $63 billion. Really? I mean, Palantir is under $40 billion. Snowflake is $63 billion. I mean, their growth rate has been declining over the past 5 quarters, even though they're above 30% still. You tell me if Snowflake's worth. And see, I'm not saying they are or they aren't. I'm just saying you're going to get a high multiple if interest rates are going to start to come down, which is what we saw with the Fed's decision yesterday. And you're a software company. Software companies tend to get those types of multiples, especially if they can keep up that growth. So the high multiple thing is ridiculous to me. Insiders are selling stock. Insiders sell stock at every company. I mean, if that's going to be your bear case about Palantir, then you're going to have a bear case about every single company. He's talking about NVIDIA has pricing power. Dude, do you know how much stock Jensen Huang has sold? It's like almost $200 million worth of stock at the nice 490, 485 price ranges, right? So like, it's not like NVIDIA hasn't, CEOs have not been selling stock. He then says Tesla has no pricing power. NVIDIA has pricing power. This is also a dumb argument, because NVIDIA having pricing power does not mean that Meet Kevin should have an ETF filled with an NVIDIA. I mean, the whole point of an ETF is to have a diversification of stocks. So like, bringing up the argument that NVIDIA has pricing power, Palantir doesn't. It's like, why can't you have both? It's why Meet Kevin added Palantir to his ETF. He believes that they have some level of pricing power. They're going to have some level of operational excellence over the next couple of years, which is why he wants to keep them. Tesla, by the way, even though they've struggled with pricing power given higher interest rates, they have the best automotive margins in the world. And the reason for that is because they've been able to vertically integrate. So, and this guy is supposedly supposed to be some massive Tesla bull. It's like, it's just a very weird way he's using to justify why Palantir is a bad investment, but Tesla has no pricing power. Nvidia does, even though Nvidia insiders are selling stock, even though Elon's sold tons of stock before, right, to finance the Twitter purchase. But like, Palantir is over there on an island, and it's some horrible company. It's like, give me a break. This is ridiculous. Final argument, he says, government enterprise is private tracking. This is just stupid. Their commercial growth in the US is above 30%. They announced 4 international partnerships in the commercial space this week. Palantir's commercial growth, I believe, is going to be what sets them up to become a very big company in the future. Government is a great, nice business to have. I think it's financing and giving us the ability to eventually expand into commercial. I'm investing in them for commercial, even though I like the fact that the government business is there. So from a pure business perspective, there's no reason to say that the government, working with the government is bad, especially when the government has an unlimited budget and they're willing to spend on AI and machine learning services within the military. Overall, I think his entire argument lacks so much nuance. I mean, this is a guy that compares Palantir to Nazi Germany without really understanding what Palantir is doing. Just ask yourself the question, why would the NHS be giving Nazi Germany a contract to manage 70 million people's healthcare data? Ask yourself that question. I mean, and if you can come up with a good answer, I would love to know. But these are the simple questions Ross Gerber hasn't answered. These are the simple questions he's refused to answer. These are the simple things that he doesn't want to talk about when people bring up Palantir. And the reason people bring up Palantir is the guy's a big name in the investing community. But when you say stuff like this, it's just like, dude, you're losing a lot of credibility with me, And I think with a lot of people, because if Palantir ends up becoming one of those companies, and not only you missed out on it from an investment perspective, but you constantly said they were like an evil company and Alex Karp was this evil person without listening to what the guy's actually saying and why what he's saying actually matters in the world we're living in. It's just, it's not an interesting thing to see from a fund manager like that. So those are my thoughts on Ross Gerber. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. It'll be interesting to see what you guys have to say. And yeah, today's episode was dedicated to Mr. Ross Gerber. If you're going to be a public figure and make these public statements, you're going to have people that have public responses. I'll leave the full video where I broke down, if you have 30 minutes to kill tonight, I broke down his argument back in December 2021. If you haven't seen it, it was a really interesting breakdown of what he had to say. And tomorrow we'll be back with all the big news in the world of Palantir. But I think sometimes you got to dedicate an episode to our bears in the community that really just don't have the best bear case anyway. So, yeah, that's it for me. Thank you guys for listening and watching. I'll see you on the next one.